Hello and welcome to the podcast COTRI Talks. And today I'm very happy to start our series of interviews with China outbound tourism experts. And our first guest is certainly an expert who has spent more than a decade in China and has been working in the field. And this is Anders Ellemann Kristensen from Albatross Travel. Welcome, Anders.
Thank you, Wolfgang, and it's a pleasure to be joining you once again on a talk on Chinese outbound tourism.
Thank you very much for that. And so maybe we can just start that you give a little introduction of your connection to China and of what your company is doing for the Chinese outbound market.
Yeah, I came to China in 2003 on an exchange program, and I started working with Chinese tourism in about 2004, first as a student job guiding Scandinavians around China, and then around 2010 we started Albatross Travel China, which is a subdivision of a larger Scandinavian travel agency based out of Copenhagen. And then about 7 years ago, we branched into polar tourism, which is going to the Arctic with these polar strength ships. And Antarctica, we start out of Ushuaia in Argentina, and we start in Greenland, Svalbard, and Iceland for our summer programs in the Scandinavians.
Okay, very interesting. So you're based in Beijing?
I'm based in Beijing, and the office is in Beijing, correct.
I remember that you told me that in the past you have also been doing lots of other things like organizing marathons on the Great Wall.
Correct. Albatross Travel also has a Great Wall Marathon. We also have marathons, adventure marathons all over the world. We have a special division back home in Copenhagen that does this. But one of the oldest and most famous marathons is run here just outside of Beijing in the Tianjin province. I've been doing that since '98.
But no marathon on the North Pole.
We have one in Greenland.
Okay,
and we have one in. We have a partner that does one in the South Pole. And so, there are people who do it, about 200 a year, minus 50 degrees. And we have Chinese. We have about 10% are Chinese every year.
But for the ships going, this is more specifically for Chinese customers.
Correct. I think we could probably say that we were the largest supplier B2B for the Chinese market for these small adventure ships in 2019. We had almost 2,100 Chinese guests going with us.
Wow, more than 2,000. Wow,
a little more than 2,000, yeah.
And the Arctic. What is a typical product? What is a typical cruise looks like? How long does it take?
So usually a typical product be a 10-day product or a 21-day product. So there are two products where the short, more the fast Antarctica visit, and then that's combined with a trip around Latin America. So the total travel time is about 17 to 20 days. And then there's a very long one, which is 21 days for what we call the three Antarctic or the three Arctic islands. And that is closer to a month in combination with it. But a lot of Chinese guests in the past like this short version, so they could go see a penguin, go experience some of the most beautiful places in Antarctica, and then come back and then also travel around that.
And what kind of people are your customers? Which segment of the Chinese market you can attract? Obviously, it cannot be very low price, so everybody will.
No, it's true. It's the what we call the first and the second tier cities mostly. So that would be Beijing and Shanghai, Guangzhou. And then a good supplement of second tier cities like Tianjin, Qingdao, Hangzhou, Suzhou, Wuhan. We actually have some too, and then Shenzhen. So, but still, it's very much the coastal areas. Sometimes, if we're a little lucky, we get Chongqing too, and a few Xi'ans. But it's province capitals, so it's the big urban areas, and it's usually districts. Here in Beijing, it's a district called Haidian, which is where all the universities and education institutions are. Segment-wise, a little older, maybe 45 plus minimum. People who have houses, have had jobs for a long time and have done fairly well for themselves. It starts around, I think, retail €10,000, more or less, here in China.
Okay, so it means a lot of your customers actually have a PhD.
Well, they have a higher education. Yeah.
Yes.
Either they have a bachelor or a master's or a PhD. Yeah. And some also have their own companies.
How do they learn about your offer?
A lot of it is mouth to mouth. So I think what we've seen in the Chinese market is when a product reaches a certain price, which is about 30 to 40,000 RMB, which is again these 4 to 5,000 US, it tends to be people want to talk to someone they know. So either they go to a travel agent that they trust, which is our products on the shelves, or they do it through some sort of group that they are in, a photo group, even a travel group, sometimes a kayak interest group, or even like a education travel club. And so they know someone who's been there, or I even go there and give them a talk and sort of tell them this is a real product. You can go. I show them pictures. So digital marketing, not as much as actually good, solid footwork marketing. Of course, we have a lot of partners, and what we've successfully done is we have a lot of partners in each part of China, because one of the things we found out very early is that China is actually very segmented and very regional. So Beijing has travel agents that are specialized, whereas Guangzhou has agents that are specialized, and they speak very different dialects of Mandarin. So, some speaks Mandarin, some speak Guangdonghua, Baihua. But even other places in China have their own dialects. So they usually have their own people introducing them to products. So in that way, it's more of an intimate sale, more of a personal sale.
Yeah, so this is that's interesting, because it's also for our research clearly that we are also promoting recommendation marketing, that in the end this is, you can tell them 100 times how wonderful is my product, that this is propaganda, this advertisement. But if I have a friend who tells me that was great, you should do this as well.
Yeah,
this
and
is much more powerful.
Very true. And I think especially in China, because in China exposure is, Chinese consumers are exposed for a lot of commercials, and even now with all of this AI and very targeted marketing in the Chinese market, it can be difficult to reach the right clients without spending a lot of money. So going through the more standard channels, the travel agencies and those that can do personal, sort of seek out the personal guests, we do that a lot. And what we've had the most success with is actually the good feedback we get online. So people who've been on our trips and they write on their own social media, show it to their friends, show and share pictures that are different and unique and tell a story. We've seen these. In the beginning, there was a lot of people who would just show a picture of something, but now we can see they're engaging more and more in the picture itself. We have something called Bingyou, which is polar swimming. So we basically put a rope around the guest, and then they're allowed to jump into ice water, and there's an iceberg next to them, and this is filmed, and they tell that they can show so a lot of kind of fun activities. We do snowshoeing, where they walk across parts of a desolate island in the Antarctic, or the kayaking. So a lot of the Chinese clients that go with us don't want the still photo. They want the activity photo. They want to show themselves being active in nature and doing things and engaging in the trip.
So would you say that this is the main difference between European or North American customers, where you rather think they just stand on the side of the ship and watching and taking photos, whereas the Chinese are more, say, I want to be in the picture, I want to do something, I want to be entertained, and then show my friends.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is engagement. I think that the Chinese guests would really like to engage. I think in the American, the European market, there is a hardcore group of people who are adventure. It would even be adventure tourism, where they go for the diving, they go for the kayak, so they kayak the whole trip. And then the other segment of the European and the North American market is those that actually don't engage at all in these things, but as you say, sit on the boat, passively follow, walk around a little bit, and then get tired and go back to the boat and enjoy sort of the the restaurant and the things that are on the boat. And I would say that most Chinese clients are somewhere in between. So they'll kayak one time, they might shosu one time, and then they want to do what's on the boat too. So they're more, how to say, all round. They're not hardcore adventure, and they're not as quiet as the older population of the. So they're kind of somewhere in between. We've tried to find that sweet spot.
So I know that you have been having a new ship coming on stream, and so which was purpose built. I understand. So is this what you just said about that the Chinese customers want to do a lot of different things? Is this reflected also in the way how you planned the ship?
Yeah, so the ship is planned so there's a lot of outdoor facilities, so the Chinese guests can go out. We also have hydraulic platforms that are open in the front of as in the bow of the ship, the front of the ship, so the Chinese clients can actually stand and watch as the ship moves forward. And the ship is purposely built so that it minimizes the sort of the slamming, which should make it or will make it more stable. And then the Chinese guests, especially some Chinese women, are a little prone to seasickness, and that should help a lot on that. And then the ship itself has a library, it has a shop, it has a educational area where we'll talk about plankton, we'll talk about marine life in Antarctica. We have microscopes and ways to collect samples from the ocean that we can then put back again. So they can engage in education. We do lectures on board. We have kayaks. We have diving equipment. So as compared to the previous products we also have people can stay in tents enough. So we're making more and more activities, but we're trying to make them a little lighter. If it's not the hardcore survival thing, because again, we still have about 160, so we need to cater 180 clients on one ship. So we need to cater to everyone.
Yeah, that's very interesting because, well, in other fields of activity, in other kinds of tourism, basically, well, I think you find the same thing that the Chinese want to do a lot, but maybe not just one thing, and also not so seriously, and rather have the variety. So that's interesting that this is even for going to the polar regions is the same. So maybe just widening a bit the scope. So some years ago, cruise was a big fashion and a growing market, and all the major cruise companies jumped into the Chinese market. And I remember in, I don't know, back 2014, 15, like that, I read interviews with the top management people from MSC and so on, and they were saying, oh, we just kick out the fitness room and put one more Chinese restaurant in there, and then everything will be fine. And I think they burnt their fingers a bit in the Chinese market.
Yeah, I think that's a correct understanding. And I'll even go a step further back because I think it's very interesting. Actually, I read one of your articles that you wrote about cruising on the Yangtze River. And if one looks at the Chinese cruise market, maybe a little more historically, it's always been a river cruise market from the start. And that's also what I could read out of your article. And it started around the Yangtze River, and was basically from Chongqing to Yichang, which is a very famous piece, and it's where the Three Gorges Dam is, and we passed through it. And that was sort of internally in China the golden cruise route. So foreigners would come for it, and even large amounts of American tourists would do this trip. And it was very popular the first 10 years of Chinese tourism's birth. And that meant that Chinese tourists understood cruise as something where on the vessel at night, and then during the day you had full day tours, because that's how cruise ships usually, river cruise ships work. So when the large cruise ships came to China in about 2006 or 8, they kind of came first to Shanghai, and then later on a little bit to Tianjin, and then down south, and they would come out of Hong Kong. And what didn't really work, or what was tried, is a lot of capacity was put in the market. The price was pushed down. And as you said, they put in a casino and then a buffet and then some shops and maybe a little bit of singing, but it never really caught on. And I think part of it was that it became too mass tourism, and Chinese guests never seemed to take a liking to the idea of of holiday on a ship only being on the ship. And China has some, of course, some natural areas. They can go to Japan, they can go to Korea, but still there'll be sea days. And the trip itself with the food and stuff never really seemed to catch on very much in China. And also, I think the profit margins for the large cruise ships wasn't very good. It was simply sold too cheap. And I think the segment of the market that the larger cruise ships got hold of didn't really fit very well with what they were hoping. So I think a lot of capacity disappeared. But what we saw, and that's for domestic cruising, but what we saw that actually worked was that people like Viking or companies like Viking Cruises actually figured out how to take the river cruise formula that worked in China and apply it in Europe. So there's about there were five before COVID, 5 or 6 dedicated ships to the Chinese market, sailing from Holland often and down into to Switzerland, because Chinese guests would like that. They had the nighttime where they could eat and do things, and then they could get off the vessel and come back on.
You also had some on the Danube River as well.
And on the Danube River, true. So I would say cruising in China that has been successful and profitable has been the river cruises, and then the part that we do, the more adventure cruising. And I think that kind of comes back to what you and I were talking about before, is that Chinese guests are becoming more and more themed in when they travel. So they just don't go for the trophy anymore, and they sure don't go for the food, and they don't seem to go for the stay as much as the place. So even if the ships aren't top class or anything, they are okay with that too. A lot of them, especially sort of everyone outside of Shanghai, as long as it's clean and nice and there's something that going on. They don't go to a trip to stay in a hotel room. Now, of course, there will come a point where they might dwell a little longer at places, but that's where a ship works well, because they still have a fixed point of departure and a place to be, and then they can get off during the day.
Yeah. So I remember that before the virus struck, there were some development that the big companies had built new ships dedicated for the Chinese market, where they said, okay, on the top level we have a real garden with real grass and real trees. This is for the old folks to do Tai Chi Chuan. And then we have 2 levels only for the kids with esports and gaming. And we have a huge shopping area for the middle-aged people, so that they were trying to follow this also within the concept of a huge 5,000 people or so cruise ship. So now, of course, then all this was canceled out by COVID-19. So do you think, if hopefully in some months we are back to Chinese outbound tourism starting again, that there is a bigger chance for this kind of cruise ships, as they also now understood that they have to change things? Also, I read that they have now more cabins which can be rearranged with interlocking doors to some kind of suite, so that you have also maybe parents, kids together, that they have a kind of internal living room, so that not just one cabin for 2 people, one next to the other. So
I think
there's a chance that cruise shipping is coming back for the Chinese market.
I think it will come back, but I think it will come back in the shape of I don't think these large cruise ships are ever really going to catch on in the chart. I doubt it anyway in the near future. I think in China there's a lot of malls, and there's a lot of these very fancy and very beautiful built malls, and there's a lot of stuff inside it and shops. So I don't think that they would go on a cruise ship for that. Casino is very frowned upon by the government, so I don't think that it will be confined to Macau, and then I don't think the government will allow it to be running casino ships, and I don't think that they will encourage it. So I think what we'll probably see would be something like shorter cruises. So what we can see is DFDS between some of the Baltic countries and Finland, between Denmark and Norway, is a 1-2 day cruise, or even Hurtigruten, there's the fjord cruising, which is short 2 and 3 days. That will be combined into an itinerary that may be a self-drive, that may be a shorter bus trip.
This is just for the experience and the photos to say, I've done it, but 2 nights is
Yeah, and I think Thor Hagen, the owner of Viking Cruises, said that he basically saw his cruise, his river cruise, as a competitor to the bus trips. And I think he's right. He can replace the buses and the hotels and the stopovers with the ships. So I see that much more accommodating in the Chinese market, or working much better in the Chinese market than these huge floating ships. That I don't see it. Also because there are only a few coastal areas that it can leave from. And I know that we've seen very few Chinese clients fly to Europe to go on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean for a longer period of time. They might do a 3-day stopover or a ferry trip or something like that with one sleepover. But I don't see it as being a larger going Chinese guest going for the larger ships. I think they'll go for these smaller day tour trips, or trips that have day tours.
So obviously, what you're offering is in a completely different league, because this is an experience you cannot have any other way than having
Yeah.
a ship which is specially equipped to go to the polar areas, and also, as you said, with your long experience. And when you just said 2003, I realized I think more than 10 years. Well, it's almost 20 years now. So, wow, time flies. And so
Yeah,
then,
and then
of course,
they
this is
changed the
something where,
buses.
so obviously, where this for the polar region, for the North Pole, the season is now. Obviously, this is not happening. So are you optimistic that next summer you have a fully developed season again?
Yeah, I think China is at a point now where I think uh, the population is about 60%, 50 to 60% vaccinated. The vaccinations are going forward. I think borders will be closed for a while still, not as long as Australia. And I think it will be like a staggered opening where we'll see regional openings first. We'll see Hong Kong, Japan, Taiwan, these more areas that have natural connection to Chinese tourism will open up first. And then I think Macau is slowly opening up too, and domestic travel is starting there. And then after that, I think we'll see regional Singapore, maybe some Europe too, again, based on how good the numbers are and how well vaccinated it is. So I think Chinese clients will probably start coming, next spring in a significant number to Europe.
And probably your trips are especially qualified for that, because it's very easy for you to control your environment because, except for a few ice polar bears, not
Mm.
many others around. So that is something where uh, probably it's very easy for you to show people and to assure people that sanitation and hygiene is let's say easier to maintain on board such a ship. And it's not 5,000 people, like, so this horror
It's only two.
thing of a
Yeah.
huge cruise ship where that might be very bad, but because you have only much less people, and of course not no outsiders coming in, no cleaning woman or caterer who comes from the outside and is not tested.
Yeah, I think first of all, everyone is going to be vaccinated whenever we step on the ship again. So that's of course good, and we've been working towards creating a safe environment for the passengers for a long time now. I think one of the plans will also be to make bubbles, which means that we charter flights and fly them directly in, so there'll be less interaction. But I would say that I think come spring next year, with how well the vaccines are working and holding up, and I think most Chinese people are okay with getting vaccinated. There might be a possibility of a booster sometime in the autumn, and then I think this whole COVID thing will likely turn into a kind of a flu situation where very few people will actually get very ill from it after they've been vaccinated.
Yes, yes. So I think let's finish on this positive note. So last question: when will the new ship start sailing? Is there
The new ship will start sailing in November, this year. So we have quite a significant amount of American and European guests coming with us in November. So the ship will start in mid-November.
Does it have a name already?
It does. It's called the Ocean Victory, 海洋胜利号 in Chinese. So And it's a very Scandinavian design. It's built here in China, or assembled here in China, but all of the software and the hardware is imported from Scandinavia. Finnish engines and Danish fire system and Norwegian and Swedish electronics. So it's going to be it's a fabulous ship, and we're very happy working with Merchants Group on it.
Very good. So I can say I wish you safe sailing
Thank you.
to you and your family, to your company, and to your new ship and all the other ships as well. Thank you,
Thank you,
Anders, very
Wolfgang.
much again
Thank you, Wolfgang.
for talking,
Have a great.
sharing your insights. And thanks everybody to listening. This has been a podcast, COTRI Talks of COTRI China Alpine Tourism Institute. My name is Professor Dr. Wolfgang Georg Alt. And please join us again. So you can see we started off with a real old China hand, and there are a few more coming up in the future. Thank you, Anders, again. And
thank you, Wolfgang. Have a good day in Hamburg.
Let's all hope that 2022 will see us all back in business. Bye.
Bye.